while implementing the Biden administration's executive orders. There's no question we still have a lot of work to do, but I want to highlight some of our really critical successes. First of all, we reused biometrics for 2.5 million applicants since March 2020. We reduced the number of pending biometric appointments from 1.4 million in January of 2021 to a manageable, as of this month, 7,000. We fully eliminated the front log of unopened cases awaiting intake processing, which was more than 1 million receipts in January 2021, and that was eliminated by July of last year. We did this by expanding staffing and overtime at our lockbox facilities. And this year, I announced 5 priorities to guide our efforts to build on President Biden's vision of a fair, orderly, and humane immigration system and create a more inclusive and more accessible agency at USCIS. These 5 priorities, let me quickly lay them out here: strengthening USCIS fiscal health and management, increasing hiring and improving our employee morale. 3, promoting efficiency in USCIS adjudications. 4, delivering on our humanitarian mission. And finally, strengthening public engagement and customer service. Today, we're going to focus on our funding priorities and our efforts to tackle our backlogs and reduce case processing times. All right, so starting with strengthening USCIS fiscal health and management. We're committed to ensuring that we have the resources to responsibly manage our existing workload and execute key administration priorities. We've made great strides, but it's important to note that our backlog reduction efforts require resources, including to meaningfully support our humanitarian mission and to timely respond to surges in requests for benefits and services. The good news is that Congress has appropriated $275 million to our agency for backlog reduction efforts for fiscal year 2022, which is significantly more than in past years. This includes new positions, overtime, IT enhancements, and resources to support the president's 125,000 refugee admission ceiling, a significant, as you know, and much needed increase over prior years, given our humanitarian needs around the globe. And for fiscal year 2023, USCIS is requesting additional funding in the president's budget to continue reducing our backlog, as well as bolster critical investments in cybersecurity, sustaining our E-Verify program, and continuing our citizenship and integration grant program. And importantly, we've asked for resources to support our humanitarian mission consistent with appropriations provided to other agencies that do similar work, like the Department of State and the HHS Office of Refugee Settlement, who are partners in these important programs like the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program. I have to stress, continued appropriations are critical to our long-term success. I want to thank you all for your efforts to help secure this critical congressional funding and ask you if you could continue those efforts. We can't tackle pending caseloads, improve our customer service, achieve our growing humanitarian mission, and enhance our capabilities without these additional resources. Our only options when we need more resources, which we need now, are to either put this all on our fees or ask Congress for assistance so that our fees don't have to increase as much as they would without congressional assistance for our growing needs. Now, on our second priority, increasing our hiring and improving our employee morale. USCIS, many people are not aware of this. We're currently staffed at 82% of our authorized positions, with roughly 4,000 adjudicative and administrative vacancies. So put another way, this agency is operating with almost a 20% reduction in staff. That's almost 1/5 of our staff. Addressing this gap is so critical to our backlog reduction efforts. We cannot get to our backlog. We need more people to help us process and adjudicate these cases. We're working really creatively with our partners in government, academia, and the nonprofit sector to get our message out there that USCIS is hiring, and we are committed to attracting, recruiting, and retaining and training a new generation of public servants to help administer our nation's legal immigration system. Some really good news on this front is we've secured direct hiring authority to help fast track our hiring for several key roles, including the roles that are associated with our growing humanitarian mission, such as refugee and asylum adjudicator roles, and also roles to support adjudicators in our field offices and our service centers across the country. I'm asking you today to help us in this effort, encourage anyone you know that's interested in public service to consider the incredible mission at USCIS and consider working for us. Visit our hiring page at USCIS at usajobs.gov. And finally, retention of our amazing and extraordinary workforce is a key priority. Let's not forget here, all of us have been through a pretty challenging period through COVID, and the USCIS workforce is no exception. We had to adapt our workplace, our work requirements, along with our personal lives to meet our mission in the middle of a pandemic, while at the same time facing the real possibility of what was in 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, an indefinite furlough of 2/3 of USCIS. Think about that. In the middle of a pandemic, USCIS, who normally has not experienced furlough threats, the effects of COVID and the threatened furlough reverberate today. So it's critical for us to not only ensure the financial stability of this agency, but also recognize the incredible resilience of the workforce at USCIS and to further shore up that morale. So we're implementing a multifaceted workforce engagement plan that improves employee morale and gives everyone a voice in shaping our agency's future. And fundamentally, our team needs the right resources to get the job done. So our backlog reduction efforts help ensure that we're giving our staff smart and innovative tools so that they can efficiently adjudicate cases. And that includes hearing and incorporating efficiency ideas that come directly from those that are doing the work on the ground every day. So one of our other priorities I mentioned up top, of course, is promoting efficiency in our adjudications. We're laser focused here on testing and evaluating ideas and opportunities to increase efficiencies at every step of the adjudication process. The bottom line is, if there isn't a clear and sound policy, legal, or integrity or security reason for doing something that we do in our process, we're asking ourselves, do we need to continue to do that? And my colleagues Dan and Doug here today on this call will discuss in greater detail what that means and what we have recently announced and will help us achieve our backlog and processing time goals. But some of the things that we've set out to help us very clearly put us on a path with a strategy is to set internal agency-wide goals to guide our backlog reduction efforts to ambitious but achievable benchmarks by the end of the fiscal year 2023, cycle time goals. We've also, as many of you have recently seen, together with DHS, we published a final rule that allows us to expand premium processing in a responsible manner. This is really important to ensure that we expand it while ensuring it does not negatively affect non-premium processing, which is, of course, not only the right thing to do, but also required in the law that Congress passed. And on work authorizations, EADs, many of you recently saw, we published a temporary final rule that temporarily increases the automatic extension period for certain work permit categories from 180 days to up to 540 days. This increase will help avoid gaps in employment for pending work permit renewal applicants and stabilize the continuity of operations for U.S. employers while we get a handle on this backlog. So I'm going to close now by stressing so that we can turn it over to Dan and Doug as quickly as possible, who will provide more details on what we're doing. I want to close by stressing that we're really clear-eyed about the work that's ahead of us, and we're not stopping with today's updates when it comes to making meaningful strides on reducing our backlogs and our processing times. We have a dedicated, innovative, a hardworking team at USCIS that's focused, laser focused on our immigration system so that it becomes more timely, more efficient, and fair. And I hope today's engagement makes clear that USCIS is listening. Your feedback is critical. It's so important helping us remain accountable to the public that we serve every day. We're committed to future engagements on this topic and so many others, and we look forward to hearing more from you and about how we can improve the timely delivery of our services. And I'm so glad I could spend some time with you today, and I'm going to turn it over now so that Dan and Doug can begin to provide some of that detail. Dan, over to you.
Thank you, Director. We know, and it's very good to be here today and to share what we have to share with you. We know that backlogs and applications and petitions can cause anxiety and hardship in those seeking immigration benefits. As you heard from the Director, reducing backlogs and timely processing of cases is the highest priority of the agency. First, I'd like to expand on some reasons why we have backlogs. And I'm going to cue a chart here that'll stay up during the next few lines. But even prior to COVID-19, backlogs existed due to application and petition receipt increases. USCIS had seen increased receipts for several years, leading to a spike in 2017 that initiated much of the recent backlog growth. As with many other government services, COVID-19 drastically disrupted USCIS operations in numerous ways and dramatically added to existing backlogs. Nationwide closures in offices that conducted interviews for naturalization, lawful permanent residence, and asylum halted nearly all in-person services and delayed biometrics capture for many applications. All application support centers were also temporarily closed, and as a result, applications that required biometrics capture were paused. After reopening, USCIS implemented social distancing guidelines to protect staff and the public, but this significantly reduced production capacity for our interview-dependent work. Complicating matters, COVID-19 initially depressed receipts, which compounded the financial difficulties that the agency was already experiencing prior to the pandemic. One response to the budget shortfalls was a hiring freeze. The agency had to use existing staff to process new incoming applications, as well as work through the backlogs. During the year-long period when there was a hiring freeze, USCIS was losing capacity due to workforce attrition, even as receipts rebounded to pre-COVID levels. As you can see in the graphic before you, for those of you who can't see, the bar on the far left is July of 2019, which was months before the pandemic started in the United States. As you can see, we had a backlog of a little over 2.6 million cases. We were gradually reducing that to the trough, I guess, in April of 2020, and that was pretty much when we started closing down our domestic offices. We had about 2.4 million cases backlog, and since then the backlog has grown to a steady rate until February of 22. We're happy to say in the first quarter of calendar year, second quarter of the fiscal year of 2022, we have seen for the first time in almost 2 years, we've seen the backlog begin to decrease. We are optimistic about April as well, and we believe that this is a turning point for where the agency is in terms of a backlog. Now, I know that going from 5.25 million to 5.23 to 1.69 million is not going to give a lot of people out there a lot of comfort, but it is a trend. We are reversing the increase in the backlog. This has been mainly due to managing for success, for getting out a message that production is important, that we need to get a handle on these backlogs, we need to improve processing times, and that is what you're seeing in this chart. What you will see in future months is results of some of the initiatives that we're going to talk about next. So as you know, the hiring freeze has been lifted and we're working to recruit and hire new staff, but it will take some time for our staffing to return to full staffing levels and for those new staff members to be fully trained. In the meantime, we're going to be leveraging overtime in order to increase capacity. We've moved forward with new flexibilities, even under the constraints of the pandemic, and to highlight just a couple examples. To mitigate the effects of biometrics capture delay, USCIS has made efforts to reuse biometrics when possible, which not only saves us time, it allows a case to become adjudication ready sooner, and it also does not require the applicant to travel to an application support center for biometrics capture. USCIS has conducted interviews using video interview technology and applying creative solutions to ensure social distancing requirements are honored and also to better balance workloads across the nation. Thirdly, since July of 2020, we've conducted over 160,000 video facilitated interviews. Over 110,000 of those have been for naturalization cases. On March 28th, we announced a trio of efforts designed to increase efficiency and reduce both the number of pending cases and overall processing time. Specifically, as I mentioned, we set new agency-wide backlog reduction goals, expanded premium processing to additional form types, and are working to improve timely access to employment authorization documents. First, USCIS is establishing new cycle time goals to guide the efforts of the USCIS workforce and to be achieved by the end of fiscal year 23. Cycle time is slightly different than processing time. It's an internal management metric that's generally comparable to median processing time. As cycle times decrease, processing times will follow, and applicants and petitioners will get their decisions more quickly. USCIS is increasing capacity, improving technology, and expanding staffing to achieve these goals by the end of FY23. The new cycle time goals apply to many of our primary form types and range from 2 weeks to 6 months, as you can see in front of you now. For example, applications for adjustment of status, which is Form I-485, and for naturalization, Form N-400, will have cycle time goals of 6 months, meaning that we will have 6 months worth of pending cases awaiting a decision. That will constitute our pending workload. As part of the trio of new efforts I mentioned earlier, I'm going to ask Doug Rand from the Director's Office to talk a little bit more about our expansion of premium processing and efforts to approve processing of employment authorization documents, or EADs. We will also highlight some of our efforts to improve processing and backlogs with respect to employment-based petitions. Doug?
Thank you, Dan. It's good to be with everyone today. Thanks so much for participating. I'll try to be brief. When it comes to premium processing, in March, DHS published a final rule to align our premium processing regulations with a federal statute and designate additional immigration forms for premium processing services. So what this rule does is it expands premium processing services for 3 form types: the I-140, which is the immigrant petition for alien workers, the I-539, the application to extend or change non-immigrant status, and the I-765, the application for employment authorization. So we now have the authority to ultimately expand premium processing to those form types, and we are getting ready to start implementation very soon in a phased way. And so please look out for updates on that front. When it comes to employment authorization documents, also known as EADs or work permits, we are aware of the toll that an expired work permit or a soon to expire work permit can take on individuals trying to support their families. And so we've taken a number of steps to try to make sure that people who are eligible don't lose their employment authorization and to speed up our own work permit application processing. So just to give a couple of examples, we provided An expedited process for healthcare and childcare workers renewing their work authorization. We've increased the work permit validity period from 1 to 2 years for certain adjustment of status and humanitarian applicants. We've updated our policies so that the spouses of E and L visa holders no longer need to apply for a work permit in order to be employment authorized. And we've added certain spouses of H-1B workers to the list of work permit categories that are eligible for an auto extension. All of these measures reduce the number of employment authorization document applications we receive in the first place, allowing us to utilize our limited resources more flexibly. I also want to emphasize that earlier this month, we announced a temporary final rule, which increases that automatic extension period for certain applicants from 180 days, which was this old status quo, to now up to 540 days. So this increase in the auto extension, which became effective on May 4th, will help avoid gaps in employment for non-citizens with pending EAD renewal applications and stabilize continuity of operations for U.S. employers. I want to emphasize that this auto extension applies to most people, but not all, who have a pending work permit renewal. Those categories that it does apply to include asylum applicants, adjustment of status applicants, asylees, refugees, TPS beneficiaries, and most other work permit categories, although it doesn't apply to certain other ones. If you'd like more information about who this applies to and who it doesn't, please go to uscis.gov/EAD auto extend. That's uscis.gov/EAD auto extend. That page is available in English, Spanish, Arabic, Chinese, French, Haitian Creole, Portuguese, and Russian. It has a wealth of information for those who are in this situation and want to learn more. But by and large, what this does is that for people who have applied for a renewal of their work permit and applied in a timely way prior to its expiration, instead of having a 180-day extension, it's a 548-day extension, which means a lot more time before one has to worry about an expiration. And also, if work authorization had previously expired, it is restored. So again, we have a wealth more information on the website that I encourage you to take a look at. In the interest of time, I'll close here and just say, as you can hopefully see, there's a great deal we're doing to reduce backlogs and processing times, to support individuals and their families and the nation's broader economic needs. We know, of course, that we have a lot more to do here, and I and my colleagues appreciate you joining us today to hear the latest news. So thanks again, and back to you, Dan.
I'll actually take it, Doug. Thanks, Doug. So thanks, everyone. Thank you, Director Jadu. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Doug. So now what we would like to do with this part of the engagement is we would like to hear from you. So I can see that many of you have been submitting questions or comments using the Teams Q&A feature. So thank you for that. You can still submit a question using this function on the screen. So there's no sort of timing out of the ability to do that. And as I mentioned earlier, we appreciated the questions that many of you submitted in advance. I believe we had a little over 400 of them. So what I'm going to do right now, while the team is pulling out some of the questions from the Q&A box, I want to again thank you for the questions we did receive in advance. And so we won't be able to get to all of them, but I did want to start with one that many of you inquired about, and that is on the topic of unused LPR cards or unused green cards. So it came in, the one that I'll choose, which kind of covered the topic pretty well, was a comment and then a question. So I'll just get right to it. It says, thank you, USCIS, for your dedication in clearing the backlog as much as possible. The number of people who are receiving their green cards are a clear testimony for your efforts. With all of these efforts going on, any idea how long it will take to clear the backlog? And will there be any wastage of green cards this year? If there is any, what additional measures are being taken to ensure that there is no wastage? And so, Doug, based on some earlier comments you made, it'd be great if you could take that question.
Sure. Thanks, Carrie. We know this is on a lot of people's minds as we approach the end of the fiscal year. And I want to reassure everybody that it is a top priority that we are working on every day to make sure we utilize all of the employment-based green cards that we can to the extent possible. And I want to just speak a little bit about how we got here and how we're going to achieve this goal. So as many of you know, just the way our immigration laws are structured, any unused family-based visa numbers at the end of a fiscal year fall across in the next year to become employment-based. So because of COVID and because of all of the consulates around the world, that some of which remain closed, there was a much greater than average number of employment-based green cards last year in fiscal year 2021. This agency, had inherited a lot of issues, as you heard from the director. We overcame a lot of obstacles, including eliminating that front log of 1 million unopened applications and eliminating the queue for biometrics and all that stuff. At the end of the day, at the end of last fiscal year, we were able to process and approve more than 175,000 employment-based adjustment of status applications, which is 50% more our typical workload. That's the good news. The bad news is we know that means a lot of numbers went unused, which is something we don't want to repeat this year. So now in this fiscal year, we have approximately, between us and the Department of State, approximately 280,000 employment-based green card numbers, which is almost double the usual number that we need to utilize before the stroke of midnight on September 30th. Only Congress can fix this problem in the long term, of course, but we are working really hard to utilize all of those numbers. We've launched an agency-wide effort to use all available policy and operational improvements to do this. That includes a number of things where we need your help to spread the word. We've published frequent communication materials, social media updates, notifying the public that we still lack sufficient inventory in the EB1 and EB2 categories. And so we're encouraging all eligible individuals to apply for adjustment of status in those categories as soon as possible, if eligible. For those who have a pending petition, in numerous categories, and they want to transfer their underlying basis from one category that's not those two into the EB1 or EB2, we have a single dedicated mailing address and a streamlined process for doing that. It's called transfer of underlying basis, and we encourage everyone to do that as soon as possible. We have collaborated with the Department of State to advance the priority dates for EB2 applicants from India considerably. So we hope more people in that category can apply and make use of the surplus of EB numbers this year. We are encouraging applicants to submit their medical form at the time they apply for adjustment of status. That can save time and help us meet this goal. And we're trying to proactively identify applications that would be approvable, but for a missing or invalid medical, and requesting them ahead of time. So that's just a few things. I hope the bottom line is we are pulling out all the stops to along with the State Department, utilize all those numbers. It is a high priority. Please don't be discouraged by the numbers that we've made public so far. There's a time lag. We are ramping up those numbers to the best of our ability.
Thanks, Doug. All right, in the interest of time, I'm just going to keep moving. So we did receive many questions on processing times for the Form I-129F, the petition for the alien fiance and the K-1 visas. So the comments and questions pointed to frustration with current processing times and asked about our plans to prioritize these cases. So Dan, if you can talk a little bit about our efforts to address specifically the I-129F and the processing times associated, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure, thanks, Carrie. I guess bottom line up front on this is, as you saw in one of the previous charts that we showed, our cycle time goal for the end of FY23 for I-129Fs for fiancés is 6 months. So we anticipate by the end of fiscal year 23 to have only 6 months of cases on hand. In addition to the resource constraints that I discussed earlier and the director alluded to, the California Service Center, which is the office that currently adjudicates I-129Fs, was going through some internal restructuring, which caused a temporary decrease in capacity and available hours to adjudicate these cases, among others. During that time, however, new officers received training and mentoring in I-129F adjudications, and now they are back on track. I did want to note that there was also an error in posted processing times for I-129Fs, indicating that the posted date for submitting an inquiry was later than it should have been, which resulted in a spike in inquiries. The error has since been corrected to provide the public with an accurate processing time of 10.5 months, which we believe is too long. And we believe that by the end of FY23, that will be much closer to 6 months or perhaps even under 6 months.
Okay, thank you, Dan. I'm going to take one that I saw come in through the live Q&A. So it's a good question. And I know for some of you, I know we had a bunch joining at the beginning, but not all participants that are in this engagement now joined at the very beginning. But if you were on, you saw our slide kind of flashing by that said that USCIS is hiring. You heard Director Jadu talk about going to our USA Jobs site to share that. So there was a question that says, is there a particular section on USA Jobs for USCIS jobs where they're listed? I know many people who have tried finding these jobs but are unable to locate any of them. Relatedly, does one already have to be a government employee to apply, or are they open to the general public? So great question. What I would say on that is anybody can go to USA Jobs, the usajobs.gov site, and create an account. And I would encourage people to do that. By creating an account, you can set up your profile, upload a resume, and you can indicate the jobs throughout the government that you would be interested in and being notified on. So some jobs do require you to be a government employee, but not all do. And so what we would relay to all of you to share is for the public job posting. So an individual would want to set up their profile to look for those public searches. So once somebody goes in and they can select all of that information, they can set it up so that they do get all sorts of job announcements. But if they are not a government employee, they would need to make sure that that feature is on that shows them the public job notices as well. So all sorts of jobs on there, and I do appreciate the question. And certainly if any of my colleagues want to add to that, please feel free. But we love the question and we are hiring, so we encourage everyone to take a look at that. Yeah, Director Jadu, did you want to say something? I thought it looked like you were going to. So
I did, yeah. So just so that, because I just want to make sure that whomever is raising this question is going to the right website, because I just went on my personal phone, so that way it's not from a work computer, a federal government computer, but I used my personal phone and just go to usajobs.gov. And if you type in the search, just literally click that search and type in USCIS. There are postings right now for 83 jobs. Obviously, there may be some that might be some requirements that may not meet what you have, but there are 83 different jobs posted at the moment. And we're going to keep posting until we fill. So, and it really is, I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't missing something and that it's only internal to the federal government. It's not, it really is there.
That's great,
And
thank you.
If I could add one more thing, Carrie.
Yeah, yes, please.
For those who want to join us and apply for jobs here, uscis.gov/careers. You can go there. You can go from there to everything that's listed on USA Jobs. There's also some other jobs we either are or soon will be posting that are direct hire jobs that have a different application process. So if you want to see all the information and a wonderful video from our director explaining why you should work for us, please go to uscis.gov/careers.
Great, thank you, Doug. Good addition. Okay, let's see, I'll go back to the questions. Doug, I'll say this next one is for you. It's from Suzanne. Thank you, Suzanne. It says, will USCIS publish current cycle times for the forms now subject to the new cycle time goals and publish periodic updates on progress toward achieving cycle time goals?
Thanks so much. That's a great question. So yes, the cycle time goals that Dan showed earlier are on our website. If you just Google, USCIS processing times, you'll get to the tool that allows you to find processing times for your own case type, and you'll also see a link for more information that includes these cycle time goals. So we're trying to be very transparent, just as the director has sent these cycle time goals to the entire USCIS workforce to rally everyone around these ambitious but achievable goals. We're being transparent with the public about where we want to be and where we're driving towards by the end of fiscal year 2023. And we do plan to keep the public updated on how we're doing compared to those goals. We would also want to add that we just recently updated how we present our current processing times to the public to try to make it clearer and more personalized. So if you go to our processing times search page, you can plug in not only your form type, but also the subtype that applies to you. Like not just I'm applying for a work permit, but also what kind of work permit category, for example. And then you'll get the 80th percentile processing time that we've achieved over the past 6 months. And you'll also get a wealth of additional information that wasn't available until recently about how we calculate these processing times, how we calculate cycle times, and that's just the beginning. And we're hearing your feedback and plan to make a lot more improvements to how we present this information transparently going forward.
Great, thanks, Doug. Okay, this next question I'll give to Dan. It's from GC. Thank you. It says, can USCIS disclose how cases are being selected at the Nebraska Service Center to transfer to the NBC, so the National Benefit Center? So because so far it looks like the cases transferred out are selected randomly, and cases submitted in FY22 had higher possibility to be selected. And we did get a number of questions in the Teams chat, Dan, as well about I'll say case transfers between locations. So this would be helpful if you could address this, Dan. Thank you.
Sure. So the answer is yes, we can disclose. It's not a secret. So with respect to I-140s and I-45s, first of all, it's important to know that Service Center Operations is responsible for adjudicating the I-140, and typically Field Operations is responsible for adjudicating the I-45. So, and that's a recent switch. We recently moved more of the I-45 adjudications from service centers to the field in order to allow Service Center Operations to focus more on the I-140s and kind of expand our capacity to make sure we use as many employment-based visa numbers as possible this year. So when an I-45 is at the service center, it is ready to go to a field office once the I-140 has been approved and a visa number is available. So depending on the country of chargeability, the classification, and the date, and whether or not the I-140 has in fact been approved, that will be the determining factor of which cases move to a field office and which remain at a service center until it is ready for adjudication of the I-45.
Great, thanks, Dan. So Dan, I'm going to give this next one to you. It's talking about average time to train a new employee, and so with some of the things we've been talking about. So the specific question that just came in from our live Q&A is, what is the average time to train a new employee? So for example, if a new employee was hired today, how many weeks or months would it take to see them meaningfully, efficiently processing? If you could address that, Dan, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, sure, I can. And I'd say it depends on workload, but while completing full new officer training can take many months, because we do send people to or we have a 6-week training program for new officers that can either be done remotely or residentially. And that's sometimes scheduled long after they enter onto duty, especially when we're in a hiring surge. Typically, most officers are able to process non-complex cases months after coming on board, and certainly, within 6 months, we believe that they are fully capable of taking on a full load of work. So that's what we use for planning. And I think that's generally what we average. We are working on our basic training and our specialized training in the office, our case-specific training, to make sure that we are using the most modern techniques and that we are doing what we can to get people, such that they can hit the ground as quickly as possible and be fully trained and confident. Not only they're confident in the decisions they're making, but that we are confident that they're making the right decision in a fair and unbiased way.
Thank you. Okay, Doug, I'm going to have this next one go to you. You did talk a little bit about this in your opening remarks, but given the importance, I thought it might be good to just highlight some of the numbers we're seeing. So it's about the employment-based delays. So the question that has come in says, it's been almost 4 months since USCIS requested the applicants to transfer their underlying basis from EB3 to EB2 category. Can we know the progress of the applications received by USCIS so far on this?
Thanks, Carrie. I'm really glad we got that question and that we can address it. The process is working, and we can give you some numbers on that. So as of May 11th, USCIS had received over 11,700 mailers containing transfers of underlying basis requests at the new address we set up at our Western Forum Center. So that's a good, healthy number. Again, through that date of May 11th, USCIS had made nearly 5,000 of those transfer of underlying basis requests available electronically to the adjudicating office or service center. So that means they are off to be adjudicated. And we will get through all of them to make sure they're adjudicated timely this fiscal year. The speed of processing those transfer of underlying basis requests through our new process has accelerated a lot over the past month. We're confident that the remaining requests will be, made available electronically to our officers very soon, and that way, these files will be pulled and sent along for final adjudication. So we're somewhat inhibited in giving like an instantaneous receipt notice, and we know that can create a lot of anxiety. But please rest assured that we are receiving your transfers of underlying basis. We are moving them through the process, and we appreciate everybody who is responding to the call to do that, because it is the best path if you're eligible for it this fiscal year for employment-based utilization. I should say it's among the best paths.
Yeah. Right. Okay, thanks, Doug. So this next one may be for you also, Doug, again. So it's about premium processing coming in from Michael. Thank you, Michael. It says, will the I-765 and I-485 forms be eligible for premium processing? If yes, when will this premium processing process be available for applicants? And I would say related to that, I'll let you think about that for a minute, Doug. We got a question just now in the chat. Could you please let us know when the premium processing expansion announced by USCIS on March 29th will be implemented? Any specific timeline that you might be able to share on that? Thanks, Doug.
Great. That's a really good question. Thanks, Carrie. And thanks to the folks who posed it. So in 2020, Congress said that our agency had new authority to expand premium processing in 3 instances with a particular fee established by Congress and a particular turnaround time specified by Congress. And if we stuck with those parameters, then we could expand to those forms without the lengthier public comment process. So that's what we announced a little under 2 months ago, and that's what we will start implementing in a matter of weeks, because the 60-day effective date is coming up. We're not going to be able to do it all at once because, as the director said earlier, Congress also said, as we expand premium processing, we can't slow down processing for those who don't pay for premium. So we have to make sure, the rising tide lifts all boats in a sense. So what we announced is that we're going to expand premium processing first to those individuals with an I-140 employer-based petition that weren't previously eligible. That's coming first. Then we'll move on in a phased approach to expanding to I-765s, which are work permit applications, and I-539s, which are changes of non-immigrant and extensions of non-immigrant status. So there's a lot of subcategories within that. We'll be as transparent as we can be about how that sequencing is going to work in the future. I also want to add that other forms, like the I-485 that was asked about, Congress gave us the authority to expand premium processing to other forms and to set the fees and justify the fees and turnaround times that make sense. But for all those other form types, that would require a full notice and comment rulemaking, which takes quite a while. So, in terms of expectation setting, the 3 forms I mentioned earlier, those are on track for us to expand to as soon as we possibly can operationally. But all other forms would require future rulemaking.
Great, thank you, Doug. Okay, we have a little bit of time left here, so I'm going to go to some general backlog and processing time questions. And Dan, I'm going to tee up the first couple for you. This one's coming in from Mari. Thank you, Mari. It says, which factor would you say limits USCIS from reaching its pre-pandemic timelines? Is it staff, technology, budget? A few months ago, USCIS said new officials were being hired and trained. Are they already working? So if you could address that, Dan, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure, thanks for the question. I think that, as outlined, I think the pre-pandemic timelines were impacted by 2 things. Impacted by a couple of things. I think the main thing, though, was staffing. We simply did not have staff on board to handle the workload that was coming in. Demand exceeded supply. Simple math. But the more important question is not how we got here. The more important question is how are we going to get out of this? And I think the answer there lies in all 3 things. It lies in increasing our staffing. It lies in looking at our processes and our policies and seeing what we're doing, as the director indicated, that is not necessary and may not be adding value, either from an adjudicative value, from an integrity standpoint, or from a security or public safety standpoint, and questioning whether we should modify our process or our policy. And I think that we are also looking at what our technology can do for us in order to better serve the adjudicative mission. Heretofore, when technology started, when we started using technology, and I've been around for a few years here, our systems did a really good job of recording what officers and assistants did. We're starting to change that paradigm to where the systems can actually do some of the work, some of the routine checking and validating against systems, and really taking some of that ministerial, menial work off of the adjudicators, presenting them with information on which to make a decision, which should speed them along. So I think while the lack of resources in terms of human resources was the main reason why we ended up not producing the amount of cases that we would have liked to, I think the answer is a three-pronged answer in how we get out of this. It's about people, it's about processes, and it's about technology.
Great, thanks, Dan. So another question, just in terms of kind of general processing, is would it not help if you were face-to-face? And this is from Sally. Thank you, Sally. Would it not help if fewer face-to-face case interviews were held? Less complex cases could be identified and dealt with quicker instead of being behind the more complex cases, which take up considerable time and resources.
Again, the answer is we believe so. We have done fairly extensive studies and analysis initially with our employment-based 485s. If you recall, there was a period of time for a few years where we were interviewing employment-based adjustment cases. We did the work, we looked at the analysis, and we determined that there was not appreciable adjudicated value in interviewing all of those individuals applying for adjustment of status. We then looked at, and we just recently announced that we are moving away from interviewing every I-751 applicant who consular processed. Again, we had interviewed those individuals in connection with their I-751 for a couple of years. We looked at the data, we conducted the analysis, and we are now moving to more of a risk-based approach to interviewing. We are in the process of doing the same for our family-based adjudications, our family-based adjustment of status, as we have also done. In fact, with this larger workload, we collaborated with DHS Science and Technology, and we had a multi-year study to evaluate the value of the interview, when it added appreciable value, when it did not. And we have set up mechanisms whereby we can rely on risk and complexity assessments of cases to better utilize our officer resources. So we are absolutely moving in that direction. Where we can, where the law and regulations allow us to complete an adjudication without an interview, we are looking at those processes. Again, this goes back to what the director said. If we're not required to do it by law or regulation, let's look at when and if we should be doing it. Certainly do it if we're getting value out of it. But if we're not in certain cases, let's see if we can be more efficient in those areas. Kara?
Thanks, Dan. Okay, Doug, there's a question from Mari. It says, is there a plan to make all visa categories e-filed? You could take that, Doug.
Thank you. Great question. I want to emphasize that not only are there plans to make all visa categories e-filed, there's lots of technology improvements underway. And online filing is just one of many. You've probably seen that every couple of months, USCIS brings another form type online available for online filing. But there's a lot more in the pipeline. We already have accounts on myuscis.gov that allow some applicants and some attorneys to get case updates and communicate back and forth with USCIS in a secure and rapid way, including receiving requests for evidence and responding without having to use the mail. That's available to some of our filers, but not all, and we're working to expand that as quickly as we can. Something that's not necessarily visible from the outside, but that's really important is not only having online filing, but having online or digital case management on the back end, the way our officers do their work. That has expanded a great deal over the past few years, and we expect to expand it a lot more. So even though you don't see it, it allows our officers to move much more rapidly and much more efficiently to complete cases more quickly. And then, as my colleagues mentioned earlier, we're using technology to ramp up virtual interviews, which obviates the need for as much kind of like logistical inefficiency with scheduling in-person interviews. So these are just a few of the examples of how we're using technology and prudently using the additional resources Congress was good enough to give us this year to increase efficiency and reduce processing times across the agency.
Thanks, Doug. I'm going to give you one right now, Doug, that just came in. It says the main frustration within the immigrant communities and reason for lack of trust is because USCIS does not communicate the exact process, nor are the applications following any timeline or process. It goes on to say many EB adjustment of status cases are getting approved within 3 months and thousands are waiting for 18 months. Clarify and communicate with immigrants as well. So if you could address that to the best you can, Doug, that would be appreciated.
Thanks, Carrie, and I really appreciate that individual's candor. We know it can feel really stressful to try to piece together what you think is going on inside this black box, or what feels like a black box. And I want everyone to know that we acknowledge that it's complicated and can be stressful. We are working right now on some public materials that should come out very soon that try to articulate, how we're dealing with, in particular, the employment-based process, because it is so complicated. And the short version is there's so much complexity involved with the constraints that Congress has imposed in terms of worldwide caps, in terms of country caps, in terms of the interplay between numbers between the Department of State and USCIS. When somebody has a green card immediately available, which category they're in, whether they're switching between categories, that it can look very chaotic, but we're actually trying to, ultimately get everyone through as quickly as possible, as soon as they are eligible. And I think, unfortunately, looking at the information we have available can obscure that story. So we hear you, and we're trying to be even more transparent in the very near future.
Carrie, if I may add,
Yes.
I just thank you. There's nothing that, well, there are a lot of things that trouble me, but one of the ones that really troubles me every day, and there are many, but this is one that's top, is the loss of an immigrant visa at a time when there's demand. And that goes for the employment-based, but also for the family-based. As you know, the family-based has an even much longer line than the employment-based. And the employment-based, for that matter, is reaping the benefit of those numbers coming over during this time. But I want to note the law. The law was built not at a time when there were, millions of people in the family-based backlog and hundreds of thousands of people in the employment-based backlog. The law did not consider that very well. And even where it has, that's not how it's been interpreted for since it began. And then I want to add, the law had no way of interpreting a worldwide pandemic like COVID. So for State Department consulates to be closed because of COVID for as long as they have, and the movement of visas across categories in their relationship to the per country caps, it is so complex, and we are trying every single day to try to maneuver that so that we can maximize our ability not to lose a visa. It is not easy, because in the middle of that, we're also trying to process as much as we can with the resources, the limited resources that we have, that we were describing through this entire call. So if I can stress one point here, the law needs to be changed so that it can reflect the realities that we're in, and not just that we were in before the pandemic, but now allowing for some flexibility when we do run into situations like this. Hopefully we won't. COVID will pass and this will be the end, and we won't see something as drastic as what happened with COVID. But that is what we're dealing with, and we are pulling out all the stops wherever we can. And I know it's frustrating, but it is honestly frustrating for us to figure out how to do that and pull all the tools that we possibly have at our disposal. But we're going to do the best that we can, and we are working towards not losing a visa this year.
That's great. Thank you, Director. So I know we were scheduled to end at 3 o'clock. I know it's a little bit past, and certainly if anybody has to drop, we understand that. We are really getting a lot of great questions, and we really appreciate your feedback. And this is why we want to do these sorts of engagements. So I do want to get to one more that was asked. It's about the FRC file delays, and I'm going to ask Dan to address this question. It's coming in from Kumar. Thank you, Kumar. It says, do you see any backlog or maybe backlog relief in fetching A files from the NRC? So I don't know, Dan, if you can talk a little bit about what we've been doing with the National Records Center and getting A files. Thank you.
Sure, and I can, Karen. And just for background, the USCIS National Records Center is responsible for storage and processing of about 80 million files. When we request files for adjudication, whether someone is applying for naturalization or adjustment status or some other benefit, and we're required to look at the applicant's A file, we request it from the NRC. There is a large holdings at the Federal Records Center, which is run by NARA, not by USCIS. And during COVID, NARA was cautious in their reopening, which delayed a number of our file requests. The good news is, since March of this year, of 2020, over the last couple of months, I don't know the date in front of me, but over the last couple of months, we've made significant strides to reduce the number of files we were waiting for. We've worked, the National Records Center has worked with the Federal Records Center and deployed a number of strategies to increase the weekly number of files received from the Federal Records Center and reduce the number of pending requests. These efforts have reduced the backlog files we're waiting for by over 60%, and the number continues to decrease daily. At the current production levels, we expect to have eliminated this backlog of files from the Federal Record Center by July of 2022 of this year. So a couple of months ago, we were kind of at our wits' end trying to figure out how we were going to get these files with the Federal Record Centers closed. But we are, I guess, about 60 days away from being back to normal operations. So hopefully the challenges that we've seen with those delays, and we understand them, and the impacts they have, we hope that those will be short-lived. Carrie?
Thanks, Dan. So I just want to thank you all for this really helpful discussion today. As I mentioned, we've received a lot of questions and a lot of comments through the chat. So this is really helpful, and we are going to be following up on a number of these. So right now I would like to turn it back over to Director Dedew to close us out. Thank you again.
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you, Dan and Doug, for really, I think this is a great start to in future opportunities like these. And really, I always say this, we are at USCIS committed to expanding as much as possible our public engagement, as much as possible where we hear you and you hear us, so that we can work together and improve what we do here. We are ready to listen, and if there are more sessions like these that are helpful, we will continue to have them, large, small, and we will do that. And I want to thank my partner here, Carrie, for setting this up, and her team, an incredible team here. I know we will do more of these, and I'm looking forward to it. This is the type of engagement I think that helps everyone. So let's continue doing that.
Thank you, Director Dedew. So just for everyone's benefit, our public engagement team is going to take a closer look at all the comments and questions. But in the meantime, please feel free to reach out to us with anything. You can email our public engagement team. It's public.engagement@uscis.dhs.gov with any follow-up questions you may have. And I'd like to thank Director Dedew, Dan, and Doug for participating today. And I'd also like to thank the USCIS Public Engagement team for all of their work on this. And especially thank you to all of you for joining us today. Your feedback, your partnership is really important to us at USCIS, and we really look forward to engaging with you further. So thank you, everyone, and we hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Thanks for your time. Bye-bye.